Hello, BookShark BootCamp. It's your community manager, Jana, and today is our live for the month of October. Can you guys believe it's already October? Deep breaths. All right, you guys, you have either started or you're still getting your stuff in and you're getting excited to start. Today, my guest is Lindsay Lewis. She is actually BookShark's virtual lead. If you're unfamiliar with BookShark Virtual, I will put some links into our post so that you can delve into that and ask any questions you want about that for our October Q&A live, which will be next week. But today, Lindsay and I are going to be talking about how to make your homeschool an adventure. Let's be adventurous and have fun with homeschool. I think that's one of the biggest whys we all chose to homeschool. So, with a curriculum like Bookshark, it can feel overwhelming to get into your day, and it feels a little mundane if you just keep following day after day after day. So, Lindsay and I are what we would call veteran homeschool moms. We're going to talk about the fun things that you can implement while using Bookshark so that you can stay excited about learning with your kids and you can show your kids how learning can be an adventure. So, without further ado, let me introduce Lindsay.
Hey everybody, my name is Lindsay and I am Bookshark's virtual lead, just like Jana already said, but I'm a mom to five kiddos. We have ages 11 all the way down to 2 years old. And as of this year, we went from only home educating two of the kiddos now to educating four of the five. So we had a bit of an increase there, and that alone is an adventure, right? So and just to make sure things stay exciting, we also decided just this past few months to move from town out to the country to a little farmhouse on 8.5 acres. So between boxes and kittens that were gifted to us from another homeschooling family, planning for chickens, gardens, and phonics, let's just say adventure has become our lifestyle. So,
Lindsay, I
um,
have to say, knowing you over the few years that we have worked together now, I feel like you just are an adventurous person. So my first maybe question would be, okay, you're the type of person who will pack up in the middle of a school, beginning of a school year and move your family out to a farm. And we have parents that are like, I'm not that adventurous. That's not gonna happen. So what can we do to keep them with us today saying, don't worry, you don't have to sell your house and move to a farm?
So actually, I wouldn't advise anybody to just do that willy-nilly. We were very calculated, I think, in that decision, but we actually had to pause homeschooling for just a little bit just to get settled. And that's kind of when it hit me because we've been talking about doing this, just this interview with you, Jana, this discussion. And sometimes adventure in homeschooling doesn't look like that picture perfect Pinterest field trip or magical mornings or where you get to get your hot cup of coffee. Sometimes it's lukewarm. And sometimes in this area of our life, it looks like flexibility and grace and learning to see like beauty and goodness even in the midst of what could be really chaotic. And sometimes it looks like we're just going to be surviving chaos, but having a good sense of humor and remembering that learning still happens, even if it's not following your exact lesson plan that you might have had for your family.
Yeah, I think
So,
like from the very beginning to just kind of drill down, what does adventure truly mean? And it's more about curiosity and discovery than it is about epic journeys in our lifetime. I think we get this idea from Disney and all the books that we read that in order to have an adventure, you have to have like intrigue and treasure maps and leave your home. And I
yeah.
just think that life is an adventure in and of itself, and inserting some of that curiosity into your homeschool is really the way to keep it adventurous.
Sure. So every homeschool, I don't it doesn't matter if you're super seasoned, you're early in your family's journey toward homeschooling, or if you're super structured, you're gonna have days where you feel like you're doing more laundry than you're doing learning. And it's a very normal thing. And so just when we talk about looking at what adventure really means, um, our adventure right now has just been moving and adjusting to new rhythms and adding two more kids to our homeschool lineup. But when we hear the word adventure, though, we think of those big, exciting things like you were talking about, right? But it's not always loud or grand things. And sometimes it's those little curious moments, like asking questions together or finding wonder in the middle of our real lives. I can tell you right now, I have a few stories that I'll get to share with you from this moving experience that I think you wouldn't think about as being adventurous, but your kids take it to that level because they're so inquisitive and curious. So, um, while we've been packing, our kids actually started dreaming and they started talking about where they wanted their bedrooms, which seems so basic to us as adults, but they were dreaming about where they would have them. They dreamed about what animals they would want to have here on the farm to raise and then how we could care for them. And suddenly, something that could be a really stressful move became a spontaneous unit type of study on farming or animal husbandry very naturally, right? We don't think of these things because we don't have a worksheet to fill out or we don't have a lesson plan based upon that. It just became natural discussion with your kids, right? And we were reading about like goats becoming part of our farm, but we were also eating peanut butter sandwiches at the same time for lunch because we were moving, right? We didn't have anything fancy. It was just paper plates and peanut butter sandwiches. But side note, we use paper plates all the time. So don't think that that's anything that's not normal. Um, but they'll probably remember those lessons about talking about the animals and what they were dreaming about more than anything that I had planned that week in advance. My kids love structure. So they love to know what's coming next. My kids have always loved structure. However, because of our move and putting it in the beginning of the school year, we had to all be very flexible. And honestly, I think that's been one of the best kinds of learning moments that we've had together. We've had to share all of our real life moments, which we already do, right, as homeschooling families. But most recently, we realized on our Sunday morning that we didn't have breakfast food. So my husband ran back to our old house to grab some of the items out of the refrigerator that we didn't have so that we could have breakfast. Or we discovered that we didn't have a shower curtain and we just decided to go with it because it was too late to go grab one from a local store. And the floor got wet, but everyone survived, right? So but those are the kind of moments I think that remind me that adventure doesn't have to look like doing more. It's not about more. Sometimes it's just changing how we already see what is happening around us, right? So, adventure, like you said, Jana, already, it isn't about where you're going. It's about how you're approaching learning. So, it's about curiosity, discovering, and connection. And it's about being willing to say, what can we learn from this, right? So, my shower curtain moment, what can I learn from that? Well, of course I can learn. Maybe I should have been prepared and gone and gotten a shower curtain. But the reality is I didn't think about it ahead of time. Instead, what I can learn from this is how can I be a flexible mom, not lose my cool, and just go with the flow because life has to happen, right? Life isn't going to stop because I lose my cool. And when we can make that shift, I think thinking about things differently from covering material, rather going to exploring things together, being humorous when things maybe aren't going as we planned, that's when magic can really happen, I think, in our homeschool days.
Yeah, there's been so many instances where as a homeschool mom, I have had to pause and decide which way is this going to go? Am I going to have a breakdown because it is not perfect and I didn't plan and I'm the type of person that I would just take that on and feel guilty about it and I should have been a better planner even though in that moment it's not going to change anything. So there are times when I feel like I lean that way and it is what it is and then there are other times where I'm like you know what? This could be fun. How did they bathe when before they had showers? Okay, well, they bathed this way. I mean, there's just, you can take anything and with a shift of your mindset. And I think that's what's important for homeschool parents to understand, especially if you're new to the whole idea of homeschooling, is that it's a shift in your mindset. It's your example to your children. It's your curiosity that is going to teach them and give them an example of how they're going to move forward because they don't know what homeschooling is supposed to look like either. They're brand new to it. You're brand new to it. So it's all of those things put together. It's like curiosity and flexibility. But I think for me in my mindset, a lot of times it's like I have to just pause. And I'm
Hmm.
not really good at the pause, but I need to pause and decide how this is going to go because as the captain of my ship, my kids are going to follow my lead. And I think that that's something that a lot of times we don't talk about in homeschool is like, how are you influencing your children's attitudes and ideas about learning and curiosity if you yourself are not exploring these things with them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've found kind of off of that is the curiosity part, but also looking to follow like their fascinations. What are they interested in, right? And so I think every child has something that lights them up, right? I think we can all think about that, right? We've gone from, I mean, in my childhood, I had a fascination with dolls. And, my brother might have had a fascination with tractors and learning all about the different types of implements that tractors can pull, right? But those are all little things that we can look at and say, okay, if that grabs their attention, maybe we can go toward that and we can make further learning about those items that would really impact them that they'll remember because there's easy science and reading and history lessons all built into those. If we just sit and think and pause for a moment about what that could be. You don't have to throw out your curriculum or plan elaborate projects around things. You just have to start where their curiosity shows up and then just follow it. That doesn't mean that you're going to go down a road, for months and months and months at a time. Of course not. But it does mean if you follow their curiosity, they're going to follow you. Um, for example, one of my girls loves design and architecture. And so when we read about ancient civilizations, I might ask about like what homes looked like. And that really translates well to the farmhouse that we've moved into, right? We talk about materials maybe they would use, or maybe we draw some floor plans. Again, dreaming about perhaps what they would like to see the farmhouse as well, but also what did their houses look like then, right? In our area, we actually have a historical log cabin that is super interesting to walk through. It gives you a real sense of how different things were in the spaces people needed then versus what we need now. And it's a great conversation to have. Another one of my kiddos loves to bake with me in the kitchen. So if we're studying a time period, perhaps we can ask, what type of bread do you think they might have made then, right? They wouldn't have had, some of the ingredients we have access to now. And even you could say, let's look at maybe a recipe that we do now, and let's see if we can turn it to something that's maybe historically accurate and see maybe what would come out of that. And who cares if you have a flunk of a recipe, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be this beautiful Pinterest thing. We tried this. You can make fun of it and have it in a fun, just have a fun day with something like that. And it doesn't matter. It's okay. But then you can also turn it around and maybe you make some real cookies, right? So it doesn't have to be elaborate.
Yeah,
So
I
back to
think
kind of, oh, go ahead.
that idea of following their interests, I think sometimes as parents, when we step outside of the norm and now we are parent, guidance counselor, teacher, all of these things, all these different hats that we feel like we have to put on the idea of one more thing. But, and it doesn't always feel natural at first. It
Right.
feel like you have to learn a new way. But I will tell you, just like you and your girls, like the things that we kind of just stopped, like you said, it doesn't even have to take more than 15, 20 minutes to
Mm-mm.
let them like, oh, okay, well, draw what if they like to draw or use your Legos. How would the town look? And the cooking, the baking, like connecting, it's like that's what we lose
Yep.
in our educational systems because we have too many numbers and not enough time and not enough resources. When all
Yes.
of those things are gone, those restraints are gone now as a homeschool parent. And what I want to encourage parents to understand is just because BookShark is a planned curriculum, it doesn't mean that you can't deviate from this plan to
Yep.
follow your child's interest, even just a little bit in little things, and then bring it back to the plan if you want. But as I like that plan as a safety net. 9 years in, I still liked that safety net. I wanted those bumpers
Yeah.
rails up. But I did find that even in my homeschool, I didn't follow their interests. It got mundane. It was like,
Hmm.
why are we doing this? And I'd have to remember, like, oh, we are homeschooling. We get to choose. Like, these are
Yes.
things we can add in. And so it's very simple. Like, spend an afternoon with only things that they had available in that time period, right?
Yep.
Like, there's just so many little things that you create a tiny little experience that they've connected with. And now it goes from, oh my gosh, I don't want to read anymore to keep reading because now what are we going to do the next time?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think one of the things that I think we miss, and honestly, I think we all come by this very honestly, is if we were all educated differently, if we were not home educated ourselves, I think a lot of times we tend to reproduce what we came out of, right? And so it's a hard thing for our brains to get out of that mindset and remember that your effectiveness with your own children is so much different than them sitting in a classroom of 25 kids with lots of kids all over the bell curve, right? Where you're sitting down with your one kiddo or two kiddos or four kiddos or five kiddos or more, but you're able to do something that cannot be replicated outside of your four walls of your home because you have the ability to follow an interest. You have the ability to go outside on a porch. You have the ability to move around that they would not have inside of a brick and mortar. Um, and let me tell you this, I did not share this at the beginning in my introduction, but I spent 10 years as a special needs teacher. And newsflash, as teachers in that public school system, we never got through our entire curriculum by the end of the year. I promise we never did. We always had stuff left over. So it's okay.
Yeah.
So if you need permission, it's okay.
And so many parents don't know that, right? They didn't
Yes,
necessarily know that their kids didn't get through all the curriculums. They just trusted that whatever they did get through was enough. And I think parents need to remind themselves that that is the case with homeschool as well.
right.
So our first strategy is follow their fascination. So our next one is to embrace the unexpected. So
Mm.
what does that look like in your homeschool, Lindsay?
There's been so much unexpected happen. Where do I start? Things rarely go exactly as planned. And I want to say that's not just because we moved to a farmhouse. I want to say that's just because that's real life. If I was living in a Pinterest, Instagram perfect world, you might see, oh, she's got all of her stuff together. Everything is color coded, beautiful schedules. Man, her planner's beautiful. She's prepped all the lessons. But then what happens? Somebody gets sick, right? A baby wakes up in the middle of the night with an ear infection, or maybe a science experiment explodes all over the counter that you weren't counting on. Or, and if you've got toddlers, you don't even need a science project because let's talk, they are the science experiment, right? With our toddlers. This year has been a huge reminder for me that flexibility is where growth can happen. Flexibility is key. So when we moved here, we had all these plans. We were going to unpack, we were going to get organized, jump right back into school, and get right back on track, right? But reality hits. We realize we don't have that breakfast food that I talked about. Our shower curtains were missing, right? But guess what? We made it something that could have turned into frustration. And honestly, in the moment, they almost did. But instead, you make a choice to laugh about it again, to roll with it and remind ourselves this is real life. It is okay. And sometimes, again, adventure is going to look like that, not perfection.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that is so important to remember that no, nothing is perfect. And to even strive for perfection is ridiculous. Like, let's just strive for like, okay, like, and let's see what happens. Like, I really am more of a one day at a time. And so when we talk about flexibility, like even in homeschool, you think about like a schedule, like people like to have schedules. Our mind works, especially if you're coming out of that public education. Well, you have to have a schedule. What time do you do what? A lot of people ask us in the beginning of boot camp, like, give me an idea of what a schedule will look like. I need a schedule. And so I really go with outlines. I don't want to say we're going to get up at 8 and we're going to do history from 8:30 to 9 o'clock because right out the door, we're going to be behind and it's going to feel awful. So I just like to say we're probably going to do this one first, this one second, or just make an outline and I can click them off as we do them. It doesn't have to be so structured because what happens when you're structured is that one thing gets off and then you just are like, forget it. We've just homeschooled for 10 hours. Well, you probably didn't. It just felt like it because it wasn't flowing. You weren't following this detailed plan. And one thing that I have learned, I was a hairstylist for 20 years and I had to build in margin. I'm really bad at building in margin naturally. I want to just like something to end and I want the next thing to happen. And while I was not a stylist who made you wait 20 minutes every time for your appointment, that really in for those unexpected, that flexibility, you're gonna feel like you're failing and you're really not. Life is just happening.
Yep. And I think just kind of to build on that too is a lot of times one of those best parts of homeschooling is that we can model to our students, our just not our students, our children, how to handle unexpected things, right? Our kids are constantly watching us. How are we going to react when things don't go the way that we planned, right? They're learning that flexibility doesn't mean failure, right? Those two things are not the same. It's character development, not just for our kids, but also for us as we are going through being teacher. It's patience and problem solving and humor all wrapped in together.
Yeah.
So, next time something doesn't go according to plan, I think one thing we can ask ourselves instead of getting frustrated and angry or man, if we don't plan, enough of that cushion time that you're talking about, what's the opportunity here instead of taking this as a frustrating interruption, right? Because sometimes that can be where the most memorable learning opportunities can live.
Yeah. And what do your kids love like to hear from you the most? They want to hear yes.
Yes.
So rarely do your children want to hear the word no. I mean, I had one that like we couldn't even say the word no. We had to like say it a different way because it truly was triggering to her personality, which is a whole nother topic that we could talk about. But as you start to think about flexibility and being and having time, building in margin so that you can have an adventurous spirit, an adventurous
Mm,
homeschool, like
mm,
what are things that you can start to say yes to? If you build in that margin and your kids want to, Mom, can we keep playing for 15 more minutes? And it's like those are the types of yeses that you want to be able to say because that not only makes your kids like super excited. I remember my girls, the three girls, when we lived out in the country, and they would just make these elaborate worlds of make believe and play, whether it was Legos or, I mean, they did so many different things. And they'd be like, okay. And I was a timer gal. I was like, set the timer. When the timer goes off, we need to get back to what we're doing. And they'd be like, can we have 15 more minutes, Mom? And it was like when I got to say yes to that, it was the best feeling, not only as a mom, but then seeing their excitement. And let me tell you, Lindsay will agree with this, like that playtime was learning. There were so many benefits of that for them beyond just doing, the schoolwork that we had for the day.
absolutely. Absolutely. So one other thing I think like coming I can't I think going off of that is talking about how can we make like our learning come alive for our kids, right? And I think like as we're talking about making learning come alive kind of off of that with the margins and being able to say yes, I think again, you can take any topic that's in front of you, right? So we could take those extra play times, like our kids ask, to play with the Legos just for a little bit longer. What else could you talk about them? Talk about with them as they're playing Legos, right? You don't have to just let them play. You could talk to them while they're doing that, right? Um, you could also take a topic as small as talking about how the pioneers churned butter, and for crying out loud, put it some heavy whipping cream in a mason jar, tell them to go shake it around until it's turns solid. You'll have lots of laughter, some sore arms, and probably a really great tasting history lesson as well, right? Back kind of to our studying of animals here with the farm. Um, the kids are all, daydreaming about what animals they'd like to have first. Um, Now they're going to be researching what it is that it's going to take in order to raise them and raise them well. But it's also it's allowing them to do vision building on their own. And that for them is making learning come alive because they're taking responsibility for some of their learning. And I didn't have to say, this is your responsibility, right? I'm just saying, hey, here's this great interest. Why don't you go ahead and tell me all about what you're learning, right? Um, and now they're also naturally learning about how to care for kittens because we were gifted with four of them as we moved here on the farm. And so now they get to observe, granted, they're cats. I call them pasture pets, but they can observe their behaviors, talk about what they're learning from that. But that also tends into learning how to care for those other animals like chickens and cows and things like that as well. It can transition well. Um,
Yeah,
it's
I love this idea, Lindsay, that you're saying like of connecting real life with learning because you guys, okay, what is the point of learning? It is to connect with real life. It is not just to spit out facts. Google, ChatGPT, all of these things can give
absolutely.
you the facts. It's learning and connecting and making these real life associations so that it's not just book knowledge. We all know people who are book smart
Yep.
and like barely survive in the real world. And as homeschool parents, we get to connect real world learning with our kids. And so, it is simple as like, now your kids are learning about cats and maybe the ones who can write can journal or
Yep.
maybe make a story around the barn cat. I mean, there's so many ways that we can implement the academic
Yep.
with the real world. They are not separate. And I feel
Yes.
like when I was going to school I've shared I've schooled so many different ways, public, private, and homeschool. Even in homeschool, sometimes there was a disconnect. It was like, this is academic and this is life. And I never
Mm,
wanted to do that with my kids. Like, this is it all is that Venn diagram. And that's the
yeah.
space that we want to be in as homeschool parents, because that is the point
Right.
of learning, not schooling, because schooling is a system, but
Yes.
learning is a mindset.
Yep.
And so when we take these things and we connect them, that's how we make learning come alive.
Right. And kids remember what they do, right, Jana? They remember what they do, not just what they hear. So reading facts from a book, it's not necessarily going to stick. Now, you will have students that will remember things that you read to them like that, but when learning can connect to something that they're doing in real life, it's going to stick. You know why? Because you're making it matter to them, because it involves them and it has something to do directly with them. It
Yeah.
makes it much more interesting, right?
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about like nature learning, which is applicable
Mm,
right now to your situation, but we can take this and move it even if you have those kids that are not into nature. Maybe they're into video games, maybe they're
yep,
audio visual, then take them down the road of finding documentaries of things that you are learning about so they can visually see it. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, something that has stuck with me since childhood, was seeing actual footage of the war camps being liberated in World War II. I will never
mm,
forget those images. And
mm-hmm,
it was age appropriate, let me just say, but it was that kind of stuff that's like you can read about it.
mm-hmm,
But then as an adult, just a few years ago, we watched a DVD series about World War One, and they took actual footage and put some color to it, and
mm,
it changed the dynamic of the documentary for sure. But it's like our kids are so used to things being in front of them, visualized for them. And I just don't think there's any reason to take that away. I am a believer in reading and imagining ourselves. But then when we can show them that this actually happened, this wasn't just stories we're telling you. This is so finding those videos, letting your kids make videos, clipping videos together, maybe making a commercial about something that you guys are
absolutely,
learning, like these types of things, like let's let them lead us. They're still learning, but they're having fun, and you can start to
absolutely.
see their passions come out,
Mm.
and it's so exciting.
So with that, the video that you mentioned, this made me think of something. My two oldest girls, so they're 11 and 9. One thing they love to do, we have just a very old iPhone. We have it kind of locked down. There's no internet or anything like that, but they have access to a camera on it. And one thing that I have caught them doing is um, they'll record themselves doing something. And one time it was making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but it was the best thing ever because they were having to think about this. How many times do you go through lessons academically where you're having to put step-by-step processes in order, right? They were doing that naturally. I didn't tell them to do that. It was something they did, and they narrated themselves doing it. And as I kind of listened to this, and then I also found some more little videos they had done, it was so interesting to hear them do something on their own like that. But they understood it in a way that was just so interesting, and it made meaning for them. And then when we come back later here as we get started, we'll be able to jump right into step-by-step processes and things like that because they've already done it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so just things like that, allow your kids to make videos of themselves. It will surprise you. Let me tell you, it will surprise you at some of the videos and ideas they can come up with.
Yeah, I think about when I was a kid, this was just because we were bored and poor. Probably my brother and I, we would like record messages to each other. Sometimes we were like spies, and then we would like figure out ways to leave him and then leave cute clues so he could find where I left it for him. Sometimes we did like radio DJing together. I mean, there's just so many things. I've made movies with my best childhood friends. To see my daughters then collaborate together, and when their friends come over, then it becomes this huge production. And even if it ends up being just like a minute clip or a 2 minute clip, like they've had so much fun and they've learned collaboration. They've learned how to, master certain things. You didn't orchestrate it. So you can
Mhm.
take that and use that and say, so, hey, we've been learning about X, Y, and Z. Why don't you guys make a video or a newsreel? Or, I mean, there's so
Mm.
many creative things now that we can have our kids do that is not just pencil and paper. It's not just following the prescribed curricula. It is like getting them excited and letting them do the things. And then these are kind of like older things, right? So we think about, okay, well, get some Dollar shaving cream and let your little ones write their letters in the shaving cream or have them dictate to you and you do it in funny voices. I mean, there's just so many things. I hate to say that we should turn to the AI, but there's ways to use it as a tool. Give me ideas to help my 6-year-old really get creative with such and such. Because again, if you're personally not experienced in thinking outside the pages of what you're given, you're going to have to learn a new way. And don't be ashamed of that. That's beautiful that you are willing to learn a new way. And so those are just tips and tricks to help you get to that place. Lindsay, real quick before we go, what are some final thoughts you have for our boot camp members today?
Sure. So you said something right there at the end, Jana, that we should be willing to learn. I think one of the biggest things as a homeschool parent is that you're always learning. Don't ever think, I'm here now. I've achieved, I've already graduated high school. I've already had my college degree, whatever. Learning stops. Your learning does not stop. We should continuously be challenging ourselves as homeschooling parents to keep learning and learning right alongside with our kids. Um, that is something that is so meaningful is when we sit down with our kids and we are just as excited and engaged with them as they are, and it makes something happen that doesn't normally happen, where when we show excitement, they look at us and think, oh, man, maybe I should really be excited about this too. And they get into it just as much as we do. We are often those temperature setters for our homes. We can be a thermostat or a thermometer, right? And that thermostat, if you think about a thermometer, rises and falls very easily, right? But the thermostat, we can set that to a constant. And so I would challenge parents today as we're trying to seek out what can we do to bring adventure in our homes. How can we also be a thermostat where when things don't go as planned, or maybe you're thinking, this does not look Pinterest worthy. Who cares? It doesn't need to look Pinterest worthy. It is okay. Be a thermostat, be consistent, be flexible in your homeschooling. So this week, I want you to try one simple thing, not your whole schedule, not changing everything, but pick just one area of your homeschool that feels maybe a little bit stale or not running optimally right now, right? Maybe it's math, maybe it's reading, maybe it's your morning routine, and ask yourself, how can I bring a sense of curiosity or adventure back to this part of my day? It could be something as simple as maybe adding a new question, trying an activity outside, or maybe letting your child lead for 10 minutes. You never know where it could go. Maybe your 9-year-old might start asking questions about something that's random. Follow it for a day. Maybe something won't go as planned, but laugh and see what new moment opens up. Be flexible. Or maybe you're in the middle of chaos. Use it as a lesson directly in flexibility and talk about it with your kids, right? So, within the next 24 hours, do one thing that invites adventure back into your homeschool. Just it doesn't have to be.
And I just want to remind you guys that adventure is a choice, not a circumstance. So thank you so much for joining our live in October. If you guys have more questions for Lindsay or anything about homeschooling and Bookshark, make sure to post those in our Q&A for October Live. Lindsay, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jana, for having me.
All right, you guys, I will see you next week on our live. Bye-bye.